What's going on, guys? Charge it up here with the R6 in the garage. For today's video, let's talk about chain adjustments. Let's go. Now, when it comes to the chain tension on a motorcycle, I usually tend to check it every 1,000 kilometers or 600-ish miles. To be honest with you, I sometimes even check when I put it down on a kickstand, just random rides here and there. I just tap it with my foot just to see how it is. And as you can see right now, there is some movement, but we'll double check how much that movement is and if it's within the allowed specs. Adjusting the chain slack on your chain is definitely easy to do. It is very essential and necessary to get the most life out of your motorcycle chain. Too loose of a chain is definitely not good. It could fall off the driven or the drive sprocket, and it could bind up. It could literally throw you off the bike, and that's definitely not a good thing. It will also slap around while you're riding. You'll just make slapping noises. Nobody wants to hear that, especially when you're riding. You would be able to hear it. I have heard it before on previous bikes, and yeah, you would actually be able to hear the slapping noise. Having too tight of a chain is not good either. It'll put too much tension on the chain and the sprockets, and it'll make them wear out a lot quicker. Not only that, it could actually inhibit the rear suspension movement if your chain is too tight as well. Just make sure to check your bike's owner's/service manual for correct specifications on the chain tension. Or even on some models, there's actually a sticker on the swing arm. This one, on the R6, it doesn't. But on some models, there's even a sticker on the back that shows you the little chain, and it shows you the tension allowance or the specs. Now, being in the industry and performing chain adjustments and chain removal and everything else, the general rule is 30 to 40 millimeters for most street bikes. Now, for this R6, as per the service manual, the chain slack is 30 to 45 millimeters. The owner's or service manual will also let you know if you should check the chain tension with the bike being vertical, on its kickstand, or with the rear wheel elevated. With the R6, it's going to be elevated. Let's go ahead and check the slack and make some adjustments if needed. I usually use my digital caliper. Obviously, I have it set from 0 to 50 just to obviously see how far the gauge is. I understand that not everybody has a digital caliper, so I'm going to actually use a regular standard centimeter and millimeter ruler. So with this ruler, let's go ahead and check what the chain slack is at. All right, we've got our ruler. There is 50 millimeters right over there, right where my thumb is. I'm gonna keep it at 50 because obviously our tolerance for this bike is between 30 and 45. So I'm gonna keep it at 50. If it goes more than 50, well, we gotta make some adjustments. So how do we do it? I'm actually gonna put the 50 mark of the ruler right across the center of the pin from the chain, right over here. So I'm gonna pull the chain down. So pull the chain down like so. I'm gonna place it right on the edge, which is right there, so right in the middle when I pull it down, and then just simply move it up. And as you can see, it's well over 50. So at this point, we do have to make some adjustments. So we're down to 50 right over here, and it's well over. So how much is it over? Well, let's say we're at 60. Let's say it's over by like 10 to 12 millimeters. So we got some adjustments to make. First things first, make sure your bike is in neutral. Bike is in neutral. Nice. I use the rear stand to lift up the rear wheel because for the R6, the rear wheel has to be elevated. The next step here is to loosen the rear wheel axle nut right here. I believe it's a size 32. Let's go ahead and do that. Loosen her up. All right, that sucker is loose. Does not need to come off. It can just stay on the axle. Now, some rear axle nuts will have a safety pin going through it. Just slowly remove that safety pin. If it's not damaged, you can reuse it. I tend to reuse it. On the Gixxer, I used it numerous times. As a manufacturer, you kind of are told to throw it out and get a new one, but I've reused it. This specific axle nut, you can actually see that it's got splines on the inside. So that is technically the safety pin, just doing the job that is actually welded onto the nut. Next step is we're gonna actually loosen the drive chain puller locking nut, which is right over here, with a size 12 open end wrench. There we go. Loosen that off a tiny bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and do it on the other side as well. Come over here and loosen that as well. All right, so now that we have the rear axle nut loosened, doesn't need to be taken off, just loosened. We've also loosened the locking nut, which is right over here. We can now actually slowly start using the 12 millimeter open end wrench right here to push the bolt backwards and tighten the chain going from both sides. But first, this is what we're gonna do. This is the axle block right over here. And at the bottom right here, you can actually see that there's little indents, right? So we're gonna use the axle block and we're gonna move it backwards slowly on on both sides, and we're gonna use that axle block and the indicators to make sure that both sides are the same as we're tightening that chain. Let's make some chain adjustments, shall we? Grab our 12mm open wrench, and we're actually just gonna adjust the nut right here to go that way. We're gonna do this in small increments. So right now, as you can see, it's on the third dot, the block, the edge of the block that is. So right here, the edge of the block is on the third dot. We're gonna go over to the other side. We're gonna look at the edge of the block is also on the third dot as well on this side. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually do the chain adjustment slowly. We're gonna small increments on both sides. So we're gonna go ahead and move it a tiny bit. So I did 3 turns on this side. 1, 2, 3. Now we did a tiny adjustment on both sides. I'm gonna come back over here and check where the block is. So you can see that's just starting to go past the third dot right there. Same as on this side. Now I specifically know that the chain adjustment is not good to where it is as yet because we were out at least 10 to 12mm. But whenever you're doing the adjustments back and forth, it does take time. So take your time, go back and forth slowly on each side, make sure both sides are the same, and then come back and periodically check to see what your chain slack is at. Okay, so I just checked the chain tension. I'm still a little bit out. I'm about 5 or 6mm from where I want to be. So we're gonna go ahead and do some adjustments again on both sides. So we're gonna start on this side now. We're gonna actually do 1, 2. Come over to this side. And we're gonna do 1, 2. All right, let's take a look at the slack, and that looks a lot better. We'll definitely double check the slack. Okay, now that we made some adjustments, let's go ahead and double check where the chain slack is at. Now, for the R6, it's between 30 and 45. However, I usually like my chains to be at 40. So I'm gonna just double check to make sure it's going to be at 40. If it's not, we'll make some more adjustments. So the ruler where my thumb is right there, right on the pin, is at 40. Looks like we are right there. We are at 40. All right, adjustments have been made on both sides. We are looking good for the spec. We're at 40mm. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna double check our blocks. So we're gonna check our axle blocks. So just past the third one on this side. And might not be able to see it because I think it might get a little blurry. There you go. The block is just past the third one on this one as well. So we are good when it comes to the adjustments being the same on both sides. I checked the tension. We're looking good. Let's go ahead and button everything up, and then we'll check the tension one last time. Tighten the rear axle nut first. We'll torque it down to 81 foot-pounds. So that's 81 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and do that now. So you'll hear, when the actual torque wrench is there, you'll hear the little click. There it is. Perfect. So once you have your rear axle nut torqued to 81 foot-pounds, you can then come over, grab your 12mm open wrench, just tighten your locking nut to 12 foot-pounds. So we're gonna come over to this side as well, and we're gonna tighten our locking nut to 12 foot-pounds. Okay, now that everything is tightened up again, so the axle nut is tight to 81 foot-pounds, and then the locking nut is tight to 12 foot-pounds. We're gonna go ahead and check the slack one more time. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to 40. I'm gonna pull it down, and there we go. We are at 40mm of chain slack. That's where I want it. Now just remember guys, it may take several attempts to go back and forth, tighten, to get the specifications that you want for your motorcycle. Just take your time. The more often you do it, the quicker you'll get at it, and the longer chain life you'll get out of your motorcycle chain. Definitely do it more often than not. Like I mentioned previous in the video, I usually do about 1,000 kilometers. I mean, to be honest with you, I sometimes do it even on random road trips that are, maybe it's a 500 kilometers or even 800. I just check. So now that the chain is tightened to specifications, this is a perfect time to go ahead and clean and lube the chain if you haven't already. I previously just cleaned and lubed it when I did the oil change, so I'm not gonna do it now. However, it's also a good thing to get into a habit of cleaning and lubing your chain. Remember, the best time to lube your chain is when the chain is actually hot. So maybe after a long ride or a good ride in the city or something like that, you come home, you check your chain tension, and then you go ahead and clean it and lube it up. I'll put the oil change video in the top right hand corner where I do clean and lube the chain though. It's gonna be right in the top right hand corner. Alright guys, that's it for today's video with the R6 on how to adjust your chain. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, remember to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell for future videos with the R6. Until the next one, guys.